Lana Leggett-Kealey has a doctorate in chemistry and has worked in pharmaceutical development for many years. She began testing her relatives' DNA and the application to genealogy in 2011. She has been certified by the Board for Certification of Genealogists since 2019 and works with clients from all over the world. I will now pass it on to Lana.
Hello. Let me know if you can't hear me and I'll speak up. Okay. Also, if you have any questions, just raise your hand or speak out. I'd rather answer questions as they come up because this topic can get complex, even though it's an introduction. So if you have any questions, let me know. Okay. Yes, my name is Lana. That's the first name. And then the last name is Leggett-Kealey. Okay, so several people ask, what will DNA do for you? How is it related to your genealogy and what can you do? So that is what we're going to talk about today. One thing that you can do with DNA is actually prove your family tree or your actual ancestry. I believe the statistic is about 10% of all family lines have at least one, what we call NPE, a non-paternal event. So, and that's 10% of all families. So I would say, don't be too surprised if you find something unusual in your family tree once you start to really look into your DNA matches and find out how they're connected. What else can DNA do? It can help you prove or disprove your relationship with someone else in your family, and we will discuss more about that. It can help you break down a brick wall. And autosomal DNA, which is what most people test at the big testing companies. I'm sure you've seen the commercials for Ancestry. And on finding your roots, it's mostly autosomal DNA. It will show you matches going back to about 5 to 7 generations. So if you have a brick wall within 7 generations, possibly 8, DNA can help you break down that brick wall. And for those who aren't familiar with brick walls, that's when you come to the end of your documentation and you can't find anything else on a particular ancestor. And also, one of the events that has been really popular in the last several years is using DNA to help adoptees, foundlings, people of unknown origin to find out who their biological family members are and where they came from. One other thing that we'll discuss at the end, and I hope we get to that, is cold case studies. Bones that they find buried that have been there since the 50s or 70s. They can use autosomal DNA to figure out who their relatives are that are living today and work backwards to figure out who these people are. And these are being solved every week now. And you don't hear about them because there are so many. You may hear about the big projects that are released to the press, but there are several companies that are doing this all the time now. So it's very helpful. Yes?
What other types of DNA are there besides somal?
Good question. Let's see. Well, I'm coming up to it, but there are 3 main types. Autosomal is 5 to 7 generations back. Then there's Y DNA, which is only on the male line. So males have the Y and females have 2 X's. So the Y DNA will tell males what surname they're affiliated with, all the way back thousands of years. And then we have mitochondrial DNA. Now, everyone has mitochondrial DNA, but it's only passed down from the mothers. Fathers don't pass it down. So the mitochondrial DNA typically will tell you your maternal line, your mother's line. And mitochondrial is pretty limited for genealogy because right now it goes so far back, it hasn't been connected yet to autosomal or anything in what we call the genealogical time frame. So it's limited right now. So what DNA won't do, and this just to clear up any misconceptions that you might have, your whole genome is not tested. The testing companies have chips that they all buy from Illumina, which is the one main manufacturer right now, and they tell the company what SNPs or little sections of DNA they want to test. And they test as many as they need to give you a nice selection of matches. So each testing company may have different results for those particular SNPs, but overall they're similar. DNA testing won't build your family tree for you, although one company, 23andMe, attempts to build a DNA tree just using your DNA matches and the amount that they all share with each other. They will attempt to build you a family tree based on those results just for your first to second cousins, not going back too far. But those are family trees that you have to go in and actually correct if you see a mistake in those. And it won't tell you how you're related to a specific match. That's for you and the analytical tools that are available to you to use to figure out how you're related to each of these people, which are your matches. So there are 5 main DNA testing companies. The largest is Ancestry, 23andMe, Family Tree DNA, MyHeritage, and Living DNA. There have been more in the past, but these are the 5 main companies on the market now. And just to let you know how they compare with the size of their database, if you look at Ancestry's database, on the left, it says it goes from millions of people. So if you look at the green line for Ancestry, it goes up to 25 million. And that was as of, I believe, December. I don't have it on here, but it was at the end of last year. So it's probably a little over 25 million. So there are quite a few people who have tested at Ancestry with their autosomal DNA. So when you test there, you are compared to all of these people, and then the ones that match you the most are listed in your list of matches. Yes?
So you're saying 25 million people have tested using Ancestry. Does Ancestry database pull in any of the test results from the other databases that are shown on this chart, or is it just Ancestry?
It is just Ancestry. Some companies will allow you to download your results for a small fee so that they can boost their numbers, which is fine. I mean, it works great for people who are on a budget because it's usually a lot cheaper to do that. But Ancestry is not one of those. So Ancestry has sales. If you haven't tested your DNA and you're considering it, just about all of these companies, mainly Ancestry, has a sale every holiday. So just keep that in mind, and they'll go down to $59 versus their normal price of $99. What's the next holiday? Okay, I'm sure they'll have one for Mother's Day. Speaking of Mother's Day, family tree DNA is the only one that checks for mitochondrial. They usually have a nice sale around Mother's Day. So if you look at these, Living DNA is the newest company. It's down there right along the bottom. It's the blue line. And Living DNA is based mostly in Europe. So if you have European immigrants that are within the last generation or two, you might want to test at one of these companies here in the States and then transfer your results over to Living DNA to see who you have or who you match that might be living in England or Germany or Italy or My Heritage is also based overseas, so they have a lot of European. And they're the orange line. 23andMe is the purple line. There was a problem with 23andMe, and a lot of people have deleted their accounts with 23andMe. Right at the beginning, it was about 6 months ago, beginning of the Israel-Hamas war, some hackers got into the GEDmatch database using commonly used passwords that people hadn't changed, that had been on other databases that had been hacked, and these were old passwords. They were able to download DNA results for some of the testers on 23andMe. So since then, 23 has essentially shut down all of their DNA downloads and chromosome browser and all their tools that we used to use to compare our matches. So the health of the company of 23andMe is kind of up in the air. We're all hoping they open back up. They have made everyone change their password and implemented a two-step password authorization. And in addition, all the other companies have done the same just to prevent any of this from happening in the future. But you might have heard about that, and that's what's happened. Where the people who have tested at 23andMe and who want their results, we're all waiting for them to open their tools back up, but that hasn't happened. They've been closed down for about 6 months. So here's your 3 types of DNA. We just talked about it, and this is the short way we write them. Autosomal DNA is AT for autosomal. Y is just the Y, and mitochondrial DNA has a little MT. We'll also talk about the X, which is tested with your autosomal, but most companies don't report it. Well, okay, I'm one step ahead of my screen here. Family tree DNA reports your X matches. So if you have a match who shares a segment with you on the X chromosome, you'll see that on family tree DNA. This is very helpful for men since they only have one X. Women have 2, one from each parent, and they're mixed. But men just have one, and it comes from their mother. So if you actually share X DNA with a male match, you know that male match got his X from his mother. So you're actually related to his mother. The other companies test the X, but they don't report it in their results. The only way to get that is to transfer your autosomal DNA to family tree, to test at family tree, or to upload your results to another site that will open up the X DNA results, a site like GEDmatch, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So for Y DNA, like I said before, only males have the Y, and Family Tree DNA is the only company that actually tests the Y from 37 markers up to what they call the big 700. 23andMe and living DNA will predict your haplogroup, which is the family of matches and ancestors that you belong to, but they don't give you the individual numbers that you can compare to other matches like Family Tree does. A mitochondrial, which both sexes have, for Family Tree DNA, which, like I said, they'll probably have a sale coming up on Mother's Day. They'll give you the full sequence of your mitochondrial DNA. 23andMe and living DNA, again, will predict your haplogroup. So let's look at where the DNA comes from. In your nucleus of your cell, of each cell, which is the little circle in the middle with the black dots, those are your chromosomes inside your nucleus. And inside the nucleus, you have your autosomal DNA, your Y, and your X. The mitochondria are little organelles that float around outside the nucleus, but within the cell membrane. They're kind of like energy organelles, and that's where they extract your mitochondrial DNA. So let's talk about what is a haplogroup. The haplogroup is just a description of people in a genetic population who share a common ancestor through a mutation. So if you're testing your Y DNA, the Y DNA apparently came from one main person. This is the theory, and over time it has mutated into a lot of different branches. So it's like a tree. And whatever branch your Y DNA mutations lie on, that is assigned a specific haplogroup. So if you share a haplogroup with someone else, you probably are related very distantly. You may or may not share autosomal DNA depending on how far back that haplogroup has gone. So it's considered very deep ancestral origins, very deep, probably before names were even used. Yes?
So this is the Y person right here, and as their offspring are born, they have the same Y or a variation of that?
That's a good question. Do the offspring have the same Y or a variation? There are right now two different types of Y mutations, fast mutating and slow mutating. So the slow mutating mutations are going to connect you to your haplogroup. The fast mutating ones, which are known and they're actually published in tables on the internet with their mutation rates, the fastest of those can change from father to son. The slower fast ones may change from great grandparent to a great great grandson. So that's something that people who specialize in Y DNA will look into, the rate of the fast mutations that exist. So this just shows you a little bit of how the DNA is inherited. Y DNA on the left goes all the way from you and you being the either male or female at the bottom of the screen. It goes all the way up through your father's line. The mitochondrial on the right is just the opposite. Everyone has it, but only females pass it down. So it's only your mother's line. And then autosomal is everyone. So all of your ancestors could conceivably give you autosomal DNA through inheritance, but you're only going to see the inheritance back roughly 5 to 7, maybe 8 generations. So the recommendations that we usually give people for genealogical clues, you want to test the older generations first. So if you have a aunt, uncle, mother, father, grandmother, grandfather, somebody a little bit older than you, get them tested right away because they're going to have closer or DNA closer to your ancestor than you are. You also want to test, in addition to yourself, your siblings. Now, unless you're identical twins, siblings are going to inherit different amounts of DNA. So let me repeat that for people who may not have heard it, especially on the recording. What is your name? D is an identical twin, and her twin have both tested at Ancestry and MyHeritage, and their results were slightly different. Now that brings up ethnicity. I do want to talk about ethnicity estimates. They're not of, let me back up. All of the autosomal test results that you get from each company are accurate except for ethnicity. Ethnicity are estimates depending on who that particular company has used as their reference population. And these companies are continually updating their reference populations and getting better and better results. So historically, 23andMe had the best ethnicity accuracy, so to speak, in their estimates. But Ancestry just came out with a new list of ethnicity estimates in the past couple months. So if you tested there and you haven't checked in the last couple months, go and check. It may have changed. Mine went from 20% Irish to 20% Scottish. So obviously they changed their reference population in that small area. So that's one thing to consider. Yes.
Just a quick question. I got Ancestry a long, long time ago, and as you said, it does update periodically. Do they actually go back and retest those 25 million?
No. For the ethnicity, when their ethnicity estimation formulas are updated, they retest in a series and they're rolled out over time for all their database people. So yes, if you tested 10 years ago, I would go in and double check. I double check every 6 months because you're going to have new matches every week at least. And if you haven't looked at it for a couple of years, it's definitely going to be different at this point. One other thing to do with your genealogy, if you're trying to figure out some of your matches, is if you have a known second cousin or a known first cousin, get them tested and you will be able to identify those people that came from the common ancestor. So if you have a second cousin, that means you share great grandparents on either your mother's or father's line. So if you and your second cousin have a shared match, which all the companies except 23andMe right now will let you look at your shared matches. If you have a shared match with someone who also matches your second cousin, you know they also share that line. So it's a way to separate your matches into your different ancestral lines. Okay, so if for people with unknown parentage, these are adoptees or foundlings. It even works for these cold cases of people that were murdered or found in a shallow grave someplace. This is what you can do if you're trying to figure out where a person has come from. Test from all 5 major companies. Basically, for Y-DNA, Y37 is the lowest you want to go. They used to start with Y12. And if you want to find out your surname, what surname you're affiliated with, if you were adoptee or unknown father of some sort, Y37 is the place to start. You can go to 67 and 111 without taking the big leap to the big 700, which is $400. So if you want to be economical, I think the Y37 would be the place to start. Okay, so you've tested your autosome. Yes. Do you have a question?
About that.
Mhm.
37 is the lowest, and 700 would be the highest.
Yes.
It costs you 400 to get to 700.
Roughly. I don't know the exact.
Right.
Yeah.
Why would I stick with, say, the 67 or the 111 if what I want is everything? How much would I get for that 67 or 111?
Good question. How much information do you get for the lower ones? What you're going to get with Y37 is a list of other males that match you at that level. So these other males, I'm just going to give you an example. Let's say your surname is Smith and you have another Smith, and then you have a Jones, Miller, and a Watson. Okay, so you're like, okay, which one of these surnames am I really affiliated with? You could jump up right to the $400, $500, whatever it is right now. Or you could go up to, let's say, if you have $150 and there's a sale, you can go to the 111 and you can get quite a bit more information. Now, just to give you an example, I just wrote an article where I was comparing the Y-DNA of some male relatives to another male relative, and we were proving that they all came from a certain ancestor, like a third great grandfather. However, there was another male with a different surname also who shared the same amount of Y111 markers. He was what they call, they tell you how many markers how many mutations you're off. So he was off by 2, as well as the one that we confirmed was from the same ancestor. However, when we looked at exactly what markers they were off, the same ancestor male, they were 2 very fast moving markers. The other person was also a fast moving marker, but his was much, much slower. So we were able to determine that this man, even though he matches and has a different surname, it's likely that the change in his mutation came from another ancestor further back. So that's the kind of information you can get from just 111 markers. Now, for the 700 markers, you're going to find where your paternal line started back in probably the 1200s. Some people are very interested in that. Some people don't find a use for it yet. I mean, like I said, if you have several people at 111 and they all match and they all have different surnames, you may want to go to the 700. Figure it out that way. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is check your privacy settings. Make sure you're comfortable with what you're sharing. 23andMe used to be the only company that also did health risks with your DNA. That was one of their good selling points. However, now they encourage everyone to share their health results with their matches. You may not want to do that. I don't want to do that. I think that's a little too much information, but I want to know who my matches are. So personally, I share my DNA with matches, but not the health information. So Ancestry now will also do health information. So you just want to check. They give you several levels of what you can and can't share. You can get out of all sharing so you don't see any matches at all. You're not going to see any matches if you don't share your autosomal. However, you can get your ethnicity results without sharing. Yes.
In my family, my brother, the only son, is gone. His two sons are gone. Our father is gone. His father is gone.
Mm.
How do we find their DNA?
Well, I did not add that particular screen, but what you can do for, you're thinking of Y or autosomal? The Y DNA? Okay, so did your father or grandfather have any brothers?
Yes.
Okay, did they have any sons? They're going to have the same Y. Or very close, maybe a difference of some fast mutating markers. But if you have other brothers, if your father had brothers, if your grandfather had brothers, and any of those people had sons, even you could even go way back and find the paternal lines of other paternal ancestors. They're going to have the same Y.
But why would their DNA be on record?
You have to ask them to test if they haven't.
So if they're gone, that's too bad.
Right, yeah. There are ways now, it's a little more expensive, but there are ways now where they're finding they can use old letters, envelopes, stamps that were licked, even haircuts that people saved. They are able to test those. Now, the hair itself is going to be the most degraded, and right now they cannot guarantee results. But for about $1,000, there are companies that will test what they call artifacts. And they're getting better all the time. I mean, they're finding human DNA in dust now. So I think it's just a matter of time as the technology gets better and better. If you have any old hairbrushes that has hair from that person, toothbrushes, there are a lot of things they can test. Okay, check your ethnicity. So that's one of the first things people check. And a lot of people, I'd say a good percentage of the people on all the databases only tested for their ethnicity. And that's kind of sad because the ethnicities right now are just estimates, and those people don't go back to the site after they get their ethnicity. And a lot of DNA cousins who are their matches may be trying to contact them through the company by sending them messages, and they're no longer accessing their account. So that's just one of the things you have to deal with if you're looking for these. If you do test, what do you want to do? Well, if you're on Ancestry, the first thing you want to do is make sure you have a family tree of your own. Start with a pedigree, which is just your parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, and link it to your DNA on the Ancestry site. This will open up a feature on Ancestry called Through Lines. And I don't have a screen for that because I was covering a lot of information here, but Through Lines is spelled THRU and then lines. And Ancestry will look at your family tree and also your DNA matches and see which of your DNA matches has a similar ancestor in their family trees. And so Through Lines will give you a list of your DNA matches who could be related to you on one of your ancestral lines. And that it will only work if you link your DNA to your family tree. Yes.
Right. I'm backing up. thing about you said who could you test?
Yes,
You know, which male could you test?
right.
If I have a cousin who had a different mother, but the same father, would it,
For Y DNA, that would work.
that would work? Okay.
For autosomal, you're only going to be half cousins. So you're still going to have autosomal matches shared with that person, but not as many. Okay, the ethnicity estimates. We've kind of talked about this already. All the major DNA companies will give you an ethnicity estimate. The continental results tend to agree, but the specific areas within the continents may be different. They may be drastically different. They may be very similar. It all depends on who each company uses as their reference population. And as I said, over time, they're going to get closer and closer. So, what can you do with your ethnicity measurement in your genealogy research? Well, if one parent or grandparent was born in a particular country, or they are a particular ethnic group, you can divide your matches into those who match that grandparent's ethnicity and those that don't. So, for example, I list 4 different ethnicities here or areas: Jewish, French Canadian, Italian, Irish. There are others. Most of these were what we call endogamous type populations, where they lived in the same area for hundreds of years. So you might have distant cousins marrying distant cousins, and in colonial America, sometimes not so distant cousins marrying closer cousins. But those people will be able to tell you if you have a match that's Jewish, most likely they are from the same ancestral line as your Jewish ancestor. Now, if you're 100% Jewish, you're not going to be able to separate them that way. You'll have to go into specific types and areas. But anyway, it's one way to separate your matches. And what do you want to do with those matches? Well, contact them. The main companies, you have to use their messaging service to contact your DNA matches. But those matches may have family Bibles. They may have documentation from immigration records, naturalization documents, old passports. Just think of what you have for some of your grandparents or parents, and think that all these other DNA matches could have similar information for the ancestors that they came from, that you also inherited DNA from. So you always want to contact your closest matches, or the matches that you know have descended from an ancestor that you're not real familiar with. Yes.
So question for you. So what would you recommend we do when we contact our closest ancestor, number one, on the match, and after repeated emails to ancestry.com, after 2 or 3 or 4 years, you never get a response? What options do we have with that type of scenario?
Okay, there are a lot of, well, first you can go to Google and just Google that person. See if you can find an email or a phone number. There are whole courses on this. How to find living people who are your DNA matches. Facebook, social sites, look them up, look up their username on Ancestry. If they have a particular username, just Google that username. They might have used that username at another site. You can also pay some of these people's sites. You can pay, I believe, $30 or less, sometimes more, for a 1-month subscription to some of these people sites like Spokeo, been verified. Look up that person and it will give you public records that show where the person has lived, old email addresses, phone numbers. It could have been updated as soon as last fall. They could be very old. So, and there are different ways that we as genealogists try to contact these matches for our clients who are doing DNA, especially adoptee clients. If we're trying to get some of their possible biological cousins to test, we have to contact them somehow and ask them to test and see if they're a close match. That's one of the ways we solve adoptee problems. And we do that by going on some of these people sites, look them up, send them letters, try to call some of these, depending on if you feel comfortable contacting someone over the phone, definitely leave a message. Some people don't answer a phone if they don't recognize the number, but if you leave a message, they may call you back and you can talk to them that way. But that's the one thing that we really as genealogists don't like, is having to go through the company's messaging system, because usually it's a tiny little icon at the very top, and unless you know what to look for, some people never go to their inbox. Yes.
What did you call those sites? People sites?
They're called people sites. And there are a couple free ones that have a lot of ads, and then they may pull up something and say you have to pay $9.99 to get this information. But if you really want to contact a particular person, and let's say you have a list of 3 or 4 matches that you haven't been able to contact, you could go on one of these pay sites for 1 month and just look them all up and then cancel your account. Yes.
Okay, my ancestors settled from Virginia after the Revolutionary War. A couple of them took their soldiers' land grants and moved west to Ohio. So I have a lot of that information. And I've discovered since I moved up here, same last name as my maiden name, my father's last name.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm kind of hesitant. I don't know what to do. Should I call them? Should I just stop? And this business says they have been in business for over 100 years.
So you just know them because you've seen their name on a
Yeah.
business? Okay. Well, I would research that business, see what you can find out about that person. And are you on Ancestry?
Yeah.
Okay. Start from that person and see what you can find. Just build your own family tree, but make it private. And see what you can find out. You might be able to connect that person way back to your ancestors by building a family tree for that person.
And I do have an ancestor I've discovered also since I moved up here that came from England in the 1600s and settled in Strawberry Bank. But he has a totally different name.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to figure out how to connect.
Well, if you can contact them and ask them to test, or ask them if they've already tested. They may have already tested, and then it's just a matter of finding them. If it's a cousin from an ancestor that far back, you may not match autosomal DNA, because remember, we're only going back 5 to 7 or 8 generations. You may still be related to them genealogically, just not through autosomal. Yes. Mm-hmm.
So I imagine you're a professional in this area.
Yeah. Yeah, for my adoptee clients, I get about 50% return on letters that I send out, even though I put in a self-addressed envelope to return. And when I contact them, it just takes one that knows a lot of genealogy about the family, and then they can encourage the others to test. So you can't stop at one. Let's just put it that way, because there's always one or two people in each family who are very interested in their ancestry. At least that's what I found. And then there are those who are very conspiratorial. They don't want to share anything. So, including my own family. So, any other questions at this point? Okay, let's go on down. This just shows you how you can be related to your great great grandparents. So we're looking at your parents is one generation, grandparents is 2, 3, 4. So this just goes back 4 generations. And as you can see, the great great grandparent, if all was equal, which it's not, remember DNA inheritance is random. But if it was all equal, you would have 6.25% from each of your second great grandparents. And that's how much you would share with other DNA cousins who also descended from them. So, how do you know how you're connected to these cousins? When you test at a testing site and they say, okay, you're likely third cousins, what does that mean? Well, here's an easy chart to remember. If you're third cousins, you share second great grandparents. So, I did this for myself so I could remember real easy. So you just take one off the number of cousin, and that's the great grandparent that you should have in common. So if it's a second cousin, it's your first great grandparent. Third cousin, it's your second great grandparent, and so on. Does everyone know what removed means if they say second cousin twice removed? No? Okay, that means you're 2 generations off. So if your second cousin's twice removed or once removed, let's say you're once removed, that means your second cousin's likely with their parent and they're a child. So your second cousin's once removed because you're 1 generation different. Now your child and their child would then be third cousins. So this is something you may want to get a chart and just keep it by you if you're looking at your matches online. What's that?
I have one of those charts and I still haven't been able to figure out how.
Then find a different chart. There are probably 5 or 6 different ways of expressing this information. I find some of the charts more confusing than they're worth, and I don't even look at them anymore. I just look at the ones that make sense to me. One site that I'll tell you about now, which is easy to write down, is the ISOG Wiki. It's the International Society of Genetic Genealogy, and it's just ISOGG. And I believe it's .com, it might be .org. GG, Genetic Genealogy, GG, double G. And there are a lot of blog lists and articles on this wiki site that will explain a lot of this. And they have several cousin charts on the site.
What did that stand for again? Sorry.
The International Society of Genetic Genealogy. Mm-hmm.
Can you say that again?
Sure. International Society of Genetic Genealogy.
And what's that going to do for us?
Well, it's just a wiki, lots of information. You just search what you want to know and it will tell you if they have information. It's like Wikipedia, but it's just for this field. So here's one of the charts here. This is the shared centimorgan project. It was put on by Blaine Bettinger, who has written several books on genetic genealogy. And it's on the site dnapainter.com. And the website is right up here on the right. I left off the www. So essentially, if you have a particular match and you want to see exactly how you're related, what other kinds of relationships you could have with this person, then you should go to the Shared Centimorgan Project. And let me show you what you do. At the very top box, it says enter the total number of CM, which is centimorgans. That's your measure of length of DNA. It's not exactly length. It takes into account mutation rates, but for all our intents and purposes, it's the amount of DNA you share with someone. So you put in how many centimorgans that the DNA testing company tells you that you shared with that person. And then this site will automatically just pop up all of these probabilities and all the different relationships that you could have. Now, the testing companies do not give you all of these relationships. So if you want to know exactly all of the ways you could be related to this person with that, just knowing that amount of DNA, you could go to this site. And as you see, it's pretty much 30, and 20%, ranging anywhere from third cousin down to half first cousin twice removed. And also that initial, this is what the site looks like when you first go on. It has all of the colors and all of the relationships. But when you put in your particular number, in this case, I put in 75 centimorgans, only the possible relationships light up. So this tells you, you could be any of those on the right. If you have a different mother or father or different grandparent than they do, you might be one of those on the left, the half relationships. But essentially, this tells you every relationship, the average of all the people who have tested and input their information in here, and the range of values. So if you look at let's look at the top gray one. It says first cousin twice removed. It may be kind of small, so I'll just read it to you. The average between first cousins twice removed is 221 centimorgans, but they can range from 33 up to 471. And at this point, Blaine Bettinger's Facebook page, he has been asking people to input more of these values so that he could increase and get these values more accurate. He now has over 100,000 database entries for this chart. So over 100,000 relationships have been added, and these are the values. I don't have the most recent ones here. This is the last version. Yes.
Now, the one that you just read, the first cousin, and it has 33 to 471. Are those ages or
No,
years?
those are the amounts of DNA that you could share with a person that is this relationship to you. There's a lot of variability in DNA. The inheritance is so random here. Now, just to let you know, the big Y700 can go up to close to 8 generations. So we're getting to the point where autosomal and Y might be able to connect. So the technology is getting better all the time. The big Y700, again, is one of the most expensive tests to take, but if you have somebody on your paternal line, you might be able to also see them on autosomal eventually. Oh, there's the website at the bottom, the isog.org, and so it's .org, not .com. Sorry about that. So I got this chart from the ISOG website. Okay, we're moving along here. The X and Y DNA gender chromosomes, we've talked a little bit about the Y. The X, the females will get a mixture of they'll get one X from their mother, which is usually a mixture of her two X's. The males, well, the females will also get the one X that the father has. So this is a good thing. If you're a female and you share X with somebody on your father's side, you know that a whole X of your chromosome is from your grandmother. So you can, if your matches on the X, you know that they're from your grandmother's line. So it's a good way to identify the most common ancestor if you're a female and you actually have a paternal match on your X. Now the males will inherit their father's Y chromosome, which is usually, well, it's definitely unmixed with the mother's, but unless it's a very fast mutating marker, it's going to be identical to their grandfather. And then they'll get an X from their mother that just comes from the mother. But since the mother has two X's, they usually go through a meiosis before they are passed down to a child. Now, one thing, if you look at the females, if you have two sisters, they're each going to have an X from their father and an X from their mother. The X from their mother is going to be different because the mother's two X's are going to mix up and then go down to their daughters. But the X's for two sisters with the same father are going to most likely be identical. And that's one way that you can tell if two sisters with different mothers have the exact same father. They will have an identical X chromosome all the way along. Well, one line of the X. So there's two lines in each chromosome. So one of the lines, the paternal line, will be completely identical for two paternal sisters.
So, if you have 5 children
Mm-hmm.
and they're raised by the same 2 parents, but 4 of them have the father's Y chromosome, one of them has a different Y chromosome. That means that one has a different father.
Depending on how different it is. Remember, if it's a fast mutating marker, they could be from the same father. But if it's a fast mutating marker, they could be from the same father if they're just one difference apart. But if they are completely different lines, they're from different fathers. Okay, the xDNA, I think I covered most of this already. Autosomal DNA tests, most of them are included at just about every company, but they don't include the X in the total amounts of shared DNA. But if you download your DNA raw file, the X is included. So if you download your whole DNA from, let's say, Ancestry or 23andMe, and you upload it to GEDmatch, you will get X matches on GEDmatch. The other site is Family Tree DNA. If you transfer your Ancestry DNA to Family Tree, you will see your X matches at Family Tree. So more on the X. We talked about this, but were there any questions about the X? Let's go into how it's inherited. That's what I like to show you. Are you familiar with this type of family tree chart? Yeah. Okay. So this is the main person here. This is a male. He's blue in the circle, and the pink line to his right is his mother's line. So this is X DNA. He does not get X from his father. He only gets the Y, so his father's whole side is whited out. But the X DNA only comes from mother to children. It doesn't come from father to father, or father to, it doesn't come from male to male. So wherever there are two blues in a row, it will be whited out. So you won't see that. So as you can tell, it's all pink to pink, or pink to blue, blue to pink, pink to blue. So it's female to male to female to male. So this shows you the inheritance of the X. So if you have an X match, you can cut out a lot of your autosomal matches just by looking at this chart. So anyone who's in the white areas is not going to share X DNA with you. So you can identify which ancestor you share a lot more easily if you have an X DNA match. This is if you're a male. Now, if you're a female, you get X from your father as well as your mother. And it's only from your father's mother. So if you see the female is the circle in the center, her father is the blue line to the left. And then he got all of his X from his mother. His mother got it from her parents, and it goes on up. So again, I think the X DNA has a lot of capabilities to really narrow down your common ancestor with matches. And I wish the companies would all give us segments of X, but we only get it from Family Tree DNA and GEDmatch. We did get it from 23andMe, and we're hoping to get that information back online, but we don't know. So going into GEDmatch, that's another way to find more matches who have tested at other companies. And I already told you it's no fee to use the basic features, but the tier 1 sites you can access for $10 a month. And why use GEDmatch? To find additional cousins who tested at different companies. GEDmatch also accepts downloads from companies other than the 5 major companies. So if you tested autosomal DNA 20 years ago and you still have access to that data, you can upload that as well to GEDmatch. That's, I think, the National Genealogical or Geographic Society used to offer a autosomal DNA test. It was pretty limited, but that was one of the first ones to come out, and you'll see that in some of your matches on GEDmatch. Also, for the matches that you have, you get their email address, their personal email addresses. So you don't have to go through the messaging sites at the companies. You can just send them an email right to their email address. And most people on GEDmatch will likely return your emails and reply because they're more interested in genealogy. So how do you transfer to GEDmatch? Just 3 things. You have to create a free account. You download your raw data file from your testing company and then you upload it to GEDmatch. And GEDmatch has instructions for doing this at every company. So once you go in and just start up your free account at GEDmatch, you can click on whatever company you're going to download from and they'll give you directions. Okay, and this is what you'll see if you want to upload your DNA. I have uploaded, I'm a tier 1 user right now because I use it for a lot of my clients. So I've used 9 of my unlimited uploads. If you're a basic user, if you're on a free account, I think you get a limited number, maybe 5 or less, of different DNAs that you can upload. But the thing to look at is on the right, where I have the pink star. It has your upload instructions. If you want to upgrade to tier 1, which I wouldn't recommend unless you've completely used all the free tools and you want more information, then go to tier 1. The law enforcement uses GEDmatch. So let's talk about that. Some people don't like this. You can opt out on GEDmatch. But there are 4 choices you have. You can opt in, which means you get matches. It includes the law enforcement use to ID cold cases and perpetrators of violent crimes. I'm in there because I figure if I have third cousins who have murdered people, I'm not going to protect them. So, and plus I know my immediate family most likely has not done that. So, but I have friends who think they need to protect their kids and they don't feel comfortable doing that. So they can opt out. And that's number 2, you opt out, you still get your matches. Law enforcement can use it to identify human remains from these cold cases, but not for use with perpetrators of violent crimes. The third choice is research, and I'm not real sure about artificially created research, except for the fact that they have a Lazarus tool, which I did. We had 3 children, my mother and my paternal uncle. We put all the results into GEDmatch, and it came up with a artificial DNA profile for my father, who passed away before I started doing DNA. It's called the Lazarus tool. So that's an artificially created one, and I can use his tool or his DNA to find matches for him. But so if you have a lot of family members who have tested and then you have one who has passed away, this is a way to kind of fill in the gap. That kind of person usually doesn't get their own matches. You have to go run the tools yourself. And then you can also input your DNA and just keep it private. So you get absolutely no matches at all. So I'm not sure why you would want to upload it if you don't want matches, but that's up to you. These are all the free tools at GEDmatch. One-to-many, so that means you put in one DNA kit and you get a whole list of about 5,000 matches. And these are matches from different companies who have also uploaded. It's not everything from Ancestry and everything from 23andMe. It's only those people who actually uploaded to GEDmatch. And you still get many, many, many matches. A lot of them will be distant.
So these are all for GEDmatch.
This is all free tools at GEDmatch. Yeah. Relationship probabilities. I've never used that one, but the one-to-one autosomal. So if you have a bunch of matches on your one-to-many, the good thing to do is to check against that one DNA kit number that matches you on a one-to-one. You can check it just between you and that person and see what chromosomes you actually match, and it will show you the segments and all the numbers that you want. You can also do that for xDNA, match how you match one person just on the X. Admixtures, your heritage or your ethnicity. You can run that on GEDmatch. There's a couple different ways to do that. One of my favorite tools is the people who match both of one or two kits. So if I have, I'm on GEDmatch and I have let's say my paternal uncle. And so I do the people who match both of us. I want to see which of my matches also match my paternal uncle. So I get a whole list of matches. So I know these matches were from my father's side. If I have a cousin who happens to be from Italy, my paternal grandmother was born in Italy. So if I have a match who's a cousin on that side, and they match both of us using this tool, I know they're most likely from Italian descent or have some Italian descent in them from the same line. You can also do people who match both, but who don't match both. So it says people who match or both or one of two kits. So if I put myself on there and then I put my paternal uncle and I want to see which ones match me but not him, they could be from my maternal line. Most likely they are, but because of the randomness, I could have a match through my father who my paternal uncle doesn't have. But most of my matches would be from my maternal line. So those are some of the fun tools to use on GEDmatch. One thing that some people use is the last one. You always have to check it if you're on GEDmatch. Are your parents related? And this tells you how much they're related. So if you're from a highly endogamous community, let's say you grew up in Indonesia or on Hawaii, or your whole family's Ashkenazi Jewish, they may be related, fourth cousins or something like that. So this is what the one-to-many tool looks like on GEDmatch. It's not as user-friendly as the DNA testing companies, but it gives you a lot of information. And I blocked out all the emails on the left. That's personal information for the matches. But the thing you want to look at is where the red star is, the total centimorgans. That's the total amount of DNA that you share with each match. And if you want to contact them, the email's right there. So this is nice. It also tells you where their DNA came from. So the testing company, you kind of have to know what they're talking about, and I think they have some help menus that help. But migration F2 down here at the bottom, it's either family tree or ancestry. I'm not sure, but it used to be all ancestry kits had an A in front. 23andMe had an M, and Family Tree had an F. But now they're getting so many kits, they're using all kinds of letters. So if you really want to know, I would just email them and ask them where they tested, if it matters.